for public comment. See, we'll move into the approval agenda, and item 1 is the minutes for May 19th.
I move to approve the minutes as presented.
In absence of our other member, I'll second the motion. Comments? Hearing none, all those in favor? Passes 2-0. Item 2 is contract awards for Bergen Woods. We heard this in the Facilities Committee meeting. It was endorsed there.
All right, I'll move that the Finance Committee recommend the full commission approve the award of the contract for Bergen Woods off-site improvements to Georgia Asphalt Producers, Inc. in the amount of $282,151.
I'll second the motion. Any questions?
No.
Okay, all in favor? Passes 2-0. And the final approval item is the rate resolution. Ms. Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, as you are aware, the rate resolution sets forth our rates and charges necessary to support our fiscal year budget for year ended June 30th, 2022. User rates in the for both water and sewer have remained the same for this upcoming year. However, our planning and construction staff is requesting one change to their planning and construction fee schedule due to the difference in the effort and resources required for different types of demolition inspections versus construction inspections for sewer laterals. They've requested to add line items for demolition inspection, first inspection at $75 and demolition inspection, re-inspection at $50. Those are listed on Appendix B in the package that you have. All other language remains the same in the rate resolution with the exception of changes that I'll call housekeeping changes, changing the years, changing the adoption rate, things of that nature. So you have last year's complete signed rate resolution and one page showing the red lines for this year's request. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer those for you.
I'd like to offer a motion.
Please do.
I'll make a motion that the Finance Committee approve the attached rate resolution for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2022, and recommend its approval to the full commission.
I'll second that motion, and I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me. You mentioned that there's some fees in Appendix B that we would be adding for inspections for demolition. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, sir, that's correct. In the very center of the page, there were already sewer lateral inspection fees for $165.75.
Okay.
Just above that, you should have a red line. I'll show you my sheet here. You should have a red line sheet instead of the highlight. Yours should be redlined to have an inserted section. Perhaps it's behind the packet that you have. It should be the very last page in the packet of the rate resolution.
Essentially, we were for demo inspections charging a full sewer lateral inspection fee. The lateral inspection is for the connection and the clean out versus the demo, we're just trying to make sure it's been capped off appropriately, so we spend less time out there doing that.
Okay.
So we wanted to charge appropriately for that rather than charging the full installation inspection fee instead of just demo inspection fees.
Okay, and that's only for facilities that had a previous connection,
That's correct.
presumably, or one that had to be changed or something like that.
Yes, sir.
That is correct.
Andrew, on page 2, where it's got the industrial users, BOD per pound and TSS per pound,
Yes, sir.
how often do we check that number to see if it needs to be
We check it
revised?
every year just to see if we're in the right ballpark. You know, it's gonna fluctuate year to year based off of how we're doing at the wastewater plant. So I couldn't checked it, and we're in the same ballpark where we were. And there's no reason to change it a penny or two here or there.
Okay.
So we leave it the same.
And then I have one other thought. Under fire protection capital fees, we have a capital fee only on for the connection of the service. Can we place a meter on the fire service, don't we?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. And we currently don't have a schedule to charge if there is consumption.
That is correct. We don't typically charge for the consumption because it is for emergency use. We do have a meter in case there is usage unexpected for a leak or something, so that we know there's something going on.
Right, so should we have a rate schedule associated with fire protection, even though the intent is not to sell water there? And I'm really just asking the question, not trying to push forward specifically that if it is in fact covered with the monthly billing rates.
If it is used for a fire suppression issue, documentation can be provided to us and we won't charge for that. But if there is usage found other than fire suppression, then it would convert to a regular meter. And at that point, we would charge the rates based on whether it's irrigation, domestic use.
Now, I would suggest right now, with hopefully very few fires occurring in the system, the fire protection monthly charge likely covers any usage from the fire that would occur. Because it's a water-only charge on the fire protection, so our standard residential water-only bill is probably $12 a month, something like
Correct.
that.
A little
So
over
if
10,
you're looking
yeah.
at a 4-inch fire suppression, that's $13 a month, so essentially they're paying a standard residential bill as a result of that. So if they have, hopefully never have a fire, but if they did have a fire and had to dump out 100,000 gallons of water, they've paid for that fire suppression charge for the past 5 years
Okay.
to cover that.
So it covers the production costs for the water, et cetera.
Absolutely.
And then if there is usage other than related to a fire,
Then we would go for that.
then it's the same rate.
Correct.
Okay, so
Yes, sir.
where I'm going with this, we don't have to have a different schedule if there is actual, I'll call it commercial consumption, if you will.
Correct, because at that point, it's no longer considered fire suppression. If it's being used for another purpose, then we charge based on the purpose.
Okay. All right, that satisfies my curiosity.
Great questions, yes, sir.
Customers that have asked about tying irrigation on their fire lines so that they don't have to install as high a grade of a backflow device, because there would be more usage and it wouldn't just be dead water sitting in that fire suppression service.
Okay.
And so we are considering some of those, and then of course it would have a meter on it to go for the irrigation system, but to keep the water moving through the system.
Okay, that's of interest.
On fire suppression systems, there's generally not any public access, right?
There should be no public access to that. It's dedicated line, it has to be a separate tap off the main line than what the domestic usage is. And then there's a dual detector check backflow at the line because there's no usage on it unless there's a fire. So you don't want dead water sitting there getting back in the system with other usage,
Right.
so
So
it's
someone should pull the truck up and fill it up with water.
They should not be able to do that.
Okay, other questions or comments?
On the septic discharges, do we accept leachate?
No, sir.
And why do we charge $15 per discharge at Academy Creek, but we don't have a minimum charge?
Because we do not accept discharges anywhere but Academy Creek.
We have a cost in here on the B, 2B on page 3 of 7.
Right, we currently do not accept discharges there. We have a fee in case we ever needed to accept it there, but we don't accept discharges at Dunbar South.
Have we been requested to accept leachate?
People have asked about it and we've politely denied.
Okay.
Well, there's a limited number of trucks that would be using that, right? I mean, it's a pretty finite number.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Since that came up, we have an 8 cent per gallon discharged. How are we metering that? Or we just
There is a
charge
flow
based
meter
on
on the, at Academy Creek, there's a flow meter into the septic receiving facility. that
Okay.
holds all that. You put your code in and you get a receipt for how much you put in and we use that to bill.
Gotcha, okay. Last call for questions and comments, please. All right, I'll call the question. Those in favor, say aye, or show sign. Passes 2-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
We'll say, this is the third consecutive year we've had the exact same usage structure for our customers.
Yeah, and Thank you for that. It's very beneficial when we can show rate stabilization to our community, and we've done that. Can't say enough about the rate stabilization. That doesn't mean the flat rate indefinitely. It just means it's easier for people and businesses to be able to plan forward when our rate structure is such that they can do that rather than having a porpoising of going up and down year to year. So thanks to staff for a terrific year in execution, and that supports the rate resolution. Final item is under discussion for the financial statements for the month ended May 31. Francis, you're up.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. First up, we have our balance sheet. The most significant change to our balance sheet is at the bottom of the page under long-term debt. We have added a line for the long-term portion of the GFA loan payable that has previously not been on there. The short-term portion of debt for the GFA loan is covered under the short-term portion of debt. It's all-inclusive there. I will point out that our construction in progress number is $18,748,000, and we will mention that on our project report. No really significant changes to our summary revenue or expenses. I did rerun the report this morning, and we are under budget a little less than we are on this report, by like $75,000 to $100,000. Moving on to our supplemental schedule of cash balances. I'd like to tie this report with the reserve accounts listed on the supplemental schedule with our project report. We currently have 26 active projects on our project report. 3 of them have multiple funding sources. Projects may continue over multiple years, and those expenses are captured on our project report and in the construction in progress account, which is a total of expenses up to June 30th of all previous years and the current year's expenses. To be added to this project list, the full budget amount must be available for all the approved projects. So currently we have 3 reserve accounts that affect the project report. We have the repair and replacement reserve, known as the R&R reserve, and it currently has 16 different projects that are either fully or partially funded by this account. This R&R account is an elective reserve that was established by the JWSC. The funds in this account must be utilized for the completion of infrastructure projects. And examples of this is the Magnolia Water Improvement Project and the lift station's SCADA upgrades. We currently have 6 capitalized projects, and they were all funded out of the R&R reserve. And when I say that we have capitalized projects, that means that the project has been completed. They've been added to the fixed asset register, and at that time a journal has been done to move those expenses from construction in progress to fixed assets. When we enter them on the fixed asset register, then at that time we can start depreciation. Another account tied to the project report is the capital improvement fee reserve. It's known as the SIFT account, and this SIFT account currently has 6 fully or partially funded projects. This is a legally restricted account. The funds for this account are the capital improvement fees that are collected by the 4 districts, and these funds are utilized for the completion of expansion projects. Examples of this would be the ARCO project, a portion of the North Mainland sewer basin reroute, and the Canal Road to Glencoe water main loop. The last account tied to the project report would be the SPLOST account. These funds can only be used for the approved SPLOST projects. We currently have 5 projects that are either partially or fully funded by SPLOST funds. An example of this is the North Mainland sewer basin. Outside of these 3 reserves, we have 2 projects that are funded by the GFA loans, and that would be the 2019 Water Pollution Control Facilities Rehab Project and the meter replacement. The anticipated expenses on the ongoing projects on this project report are at $22 million plus, excluding the GFA projects. So these funds are in the reserve accounts. They're either in cash or investment reserve accounts. And those 3 reserve accounts total $37 million in funds. And if all of the current non-GFA projects were completed by the end of this month, we would have to have that money available to pay for these projects. Available funding minus the expected expenditures leaves us with 15 million, and on July 1st, we'll have another 10 million of approved projects to add to this list. So that narrows that amount down. Planned projects are expensive. Emergency expenses projects are more expensive, so we try to plan ahead for this. The other account that I wish to mention this evening, or today, is the group insurance reserve. And this was set up to help fund our self-funded insurance, which will be also talked about tomorrow. I do want to mention that my numbers today may be different than the numbers that you will see with Ms. Tyndall tomorrow. My numbers are the actual expenses incurred from July 1st to year to date. The numbers tomorrow may be approximated based on some certain assumptions and the fully funded portion versus self-funded. Next year, we'll actually see the actual to actual expenses.
So yours are right as what we've actually put. money-
Correct.
July 1st.
Yes.
Through today.
Right.
Yes, and we have 1 month that was, July was on the fully funded, so we count that, but in hers, it will exclude that July, just so we're aware that there will be a little variance. Cost through May the 31st, 2020 was almost 1.7 million, is 1.688. Cost through May 31st, 2021 is 1.297. So we're a difference of 391,000 where we were this time last year. Our year-to-date budget for this year was at 1.755, and again, our actual expenses are at 1.297, which means we're under budget by over $450,000 for our group insurance. Yes, I like that number. Any questions?
No question, I just want to reinforce one thing. Francis, thank you for the report, the format, the presentations you've offered us. It's good high-level information. I do like that you reinforced the understanding of what our funding sources are on these major projects. I think that's excellent, and it can help the public that wants to review these meetings understand where those come from. And then the last thing I wanted to comment on is you mentioned the 22 million in reserve, and that's not a piggy bank for us to draw from when we want. Those are dollars that are encumbered or committed
Yes.
for projects that are under construction for which have been bid and approved
Correct.
for specific amounts, and that we have already agreed as a commission that those dollars go specifically to those projects. So just for the listening public, we just want to clarify, that's no dollars that are not set aside that we can just pick from to do anything else that we might discuss. Those have already been committed over a number of years now, of the various projects that we've accumulated and developed and have awarded.
Yes, some of
construction.
the 6 capitalized projects, a couple of those took several years to complete, so
Yeah,
it
and
does.
particularly, the SPLOST projects, those are such large scale, the North Mainland, for example, 3 phases on it, so large of scale that it takes a number of years to do all of the engineering, the bidding. and
Correct.
ultimately the construction, and we're beginning phase 3 on that now, and we'll complete it timely. But I just wanted to reinforce what you had offered. Thank you very much for that report.
I've got a question, Francis.
Sure.
On the 3rd page, is the combined revenue statement?
I'm sorry, did you say the summary revenue?
The combined revenue statement for the 11 months. It shows that we're under budget for sewer revenues of $503,000 and water revenues $513,000. Does this mean that our water and sewer revenues are down $1 million for the 11 months?
Mr. Burrows?
That's correct.
And then we have other income of $865,000. Where'd that come from? What is that?
That's service fees, connection, the operational portion of the connection fees that we have, that's, tower rental
Yes.
fees. So there's a lot of line items go into that other.
So if that was not high like that, that's $800,000 over budget, then we would be $1 million down, right?
Yes, sir. That's why for next year's budget, if you recall, when we did the revenue projection this year, we actually decreased the water and sewer revenues from this year's budget and increased those other income line items to be in line with where we've been at for the past several years.
Right, because I think even this time last year and the year before, we were also under budget for the anticipated water and sewer revenues.
The water and sewer revenues that we have projected, we haven't raised rates for 3 years.
That's correct.
So in the budget each year, have we had the same amount for water and sewer revenues?
Not for the last 3 years. So this year and last year, they were the same. And so we did, it wasn't the full million by any stretch of the imagination, but we saw a significant decrease in revenues this September, October.
Yes.
Obviously, October would be Georgia, Florida weekend. We used to have a lot of people in town. We didn't have near as many people in town this year. But that's where the biggest dips in our revenue were in September and October.
But shouldn't we be concerned if we're $1 million under budget for water and sewer revenues after 11 months?
That number has decreased throughout the year, so we're making up progress on that at this point, so.
I think it was double or maybe even triple that last month, so that number has significantly come down in the past month.
I think next year's, if you don't, I think the next year's sewer revenue budget is somewhere around the 13.4 mark, and the water revenue is 6.4. I don't remember exactly what the sewer revenues are. We are changing out a lot of those meters that had been zero reading meters. So we had about 3,000 of those accounts of getting minimum bills that were actually having usage, but the meters wouldn't transmit the actual data to us.
Well, we'll have a few more of those as we go through the
Yes.
years, project years 2,
We're-
3, and 4.
Correct.
And those numbers will be declining as we go forward, which is improvement because those revenues now will be increasing compared to budget. So while it looks, we are $1 million under what we projected, but to Francis's point, we're closing that gap significantly. And you even mentioned the sewer revenues forecast in the next budget. That's pretty close to annualized to this $12 million number, which is just 11 of the 12 months.
And another thing to note, we've had some large leak adjustments, and that does affect sewer revenues as well. So we're about $200,000 or $300,000 above average on leak adjustments this year on sewer revenues as well.
Okay.
Also,
But-
I think the economy is opening up and there's more people, there's gonna be more tourism, and so there's
Yeah.
more people using it.
The short of it is we're catching up on the revenues because the economy is recovering remarkably well. The negative is that we have to manage through is because the revenues won't necessarily increase remarkably, even though the economy is improving, is that we've got to manage very closely because we're holding our rates flat for the next fiscal year.
Would it be a fair statement to say that if we're running below that, our water production costs are also lower?
That's correct.
In the sewer processing.
So we're selling less water. We might not be producing a lot more water. We're producing the same amount of water, but we're selling less.
We've sold a little bit less water, but the main thing to remember is when everything was shut down, that commercial usage, which comes at a higher rate because they use more water per month, and we go to the increasing blocks, got shifted to residential rate. So the actual water production and water sold is pretty close, but if you go from a commercial enterprise that's paying, that's using 40 or 50,000 gallons a month, paying $4.20 a thousand versus $2.40 a thousand or whatever it is for the residential, it does have an impact overall just because of the increase in rate structure.
And the same thing on the sewer?
Sewer's the same regardless. Sewer doesn't matter, it's 773 1,000 after the first 1,000.
So see, sewer, it went down to the half million.
Right, and again, we're about $300,000 on sewer above on the leak adjustments. So if you take leak adjustments out, sewer's pretty close to where it needs to be at.
But you did lower the projections this.
We lowered the projections on both of them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, another challenge for us on just looking at the leak adjustment credit, basically, on the sewer side is with the second generation of metering. In my view, we ought to put into place a policy of notification that once we make the notification, there is a time certain that the credit can only apply to. And after that point, there is no credit. That way it puts the emphasis on the consumer that they need to get it fixed because they're not going to be forgiven all of it, given the ability to notify our customers sooner that they have a leak.
We'll say, if you look at the overall budget for the month of May, our revenues were over $3 million, right at $3 million for the month of May. So, obviously, that's not gonna be the same every month, but month of May being $3 million, if that's reflective of what we can expect for, say, March to October going forward during the tourist parts of the year, I think the numbers next year will be very, very pleased with the results.
Any more questions?
The leak adjustment, we do the water, and we base it on the average usage, and we come back down to what the average usage is on the adjustment.
That's correct.
On the sewer, how do we handle their sewer when we do the leak adjustment?
Basically, you get the overall usage, you get the water and sewer for your portion that's above your average. It's above 2 times your average, gets adjusted off. But on the revenue line items, the entire leak adjustment goes against the sewer revenue, not the water revenue. That's just where that line item goes.
Okay. So none of it comes from the water.
None of it comes from the water.
Why not?
It's way, it's bad as an answer as it is, but that's the way it's always been done.
Okay.
All right, are we good? All right, thank you again, Francis, appreciate the report. And being no other business to come before the